Okay, so Deconverted Man here. On Twitter, as things go sometimes, I notice debates. Twitter debates probably are, I don't know, probably not a good place to debate. There are forums, to use, but whatever. We debate on Twitter, I guess. Some people do. I'm trying not to, but I see things that are wrong. So then, okay. Anyway, so the story of the cosmos is the Twitter avatar at Story Cosmos person who is having a rather long conversation with a number of people, interjecting upon who knows how this all started. I keep scrolling up and up, and it just keeps going. And saying that, in response to evidence for God, which is really what these sort of debates boil down to, is the skeptics, the atheists, whatever you want the names to be, the label to be, saying, what's your evidence of this thing? What's your evidence that this is real? And what is it? How do we know any of it? Just give us, what do you got, basically. So the story of the cosmos had said something like, if somebody asks you if there's evidence for their favorite bread at the grocery store while you're there, and you ask them what it looks like, and they text you back this graphic, that would not be the kind of answer you need. Yeah, right. So this is in response to evidence that supports a claim is the outcome of a test. It can be independently verified, and itself is not evidence. So, okay, right. If somebody asks you for bread at the grocery store, you say, yeah, well, okay, oh, what kind of, what's your favorite bread? And they can just point to it. You can't point to God. So it's not equivalent. It's a false analogy. It's just, look, we're telling you what evidence is. We're not. That situation is a different situation. You have evidence for the bread. You can describe the bread. You can tell people what it's like. Look, nobody downs bread. So he said he would reword it. If you ask me if I've seen any evidence of your lost pet around, I would ask you, what's your pet look like? And instead of just giving me a specific description of your pet, you tell me evidence will be testable, verifiable. How would I know what to look for? Well, the evidence of the pet will be testable and verifiable, but yes, you would give a description of the pet, but God doesn't have that sort of description, apparently. So an Inane Dragon responded to that, saying, yeah, what's your pet look like? What does God look like? What does the evidence of God look like? Actually, you should have just said, what does God look like? So the answer, according to the story of the cosmos person, is his nature is revealed in what he has made throughout the heavens and the earth, and in the written record which he has left us. It's late at night. If you disagree, if you deny the universe as evidence of his handiwork, then you're employing of a standard of some sort to make that judgment. Wow. There's so much wrong with this. So I responded to that bit saying, if you didn't, well, he also said something about, his Right, this is the one I responded to. The evidence is revealed in nature and in scripture with a capital S. If you deny those, then it's clear you have standards for what would count as evidence for God's existence. The universe is remarkably intelligible. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. And so are the Gospels. If those don't count as evidence, why not? There's a lot of answers to that, but my response was, well, if you didn't have that scripture, then how would looking at the universe on its own, without those scriptures, you have to just try to get into a frame of mind where you put the Bible on the shelf and go, okay, I don't have that, or whatever book is, maybe it's the Quran, maybe it's the, Hindu text, whatever they're called, And you go, okay, well, without that, if I didn't have that already in mind, and I just look at reality around me, and I just look at the universe above me, and, I look at science and because, they might have tools that I don't have, to see more of it. And how does any of that point to anything at all in the first place, other than itself? Because obviously it's there. Okay. So we go, okay, it's there. We know that it's there. Why is it there? Maybe there's no why. How is it there? Maybe we know, maybe we don't. How did it get to that place? Maybe we can figure it out, maybe we can't. But how would any of that point to anything other than explanations that we can find and observe? We can observe, just about anything, it seems like. The only things that we cannot observe in this sense is objects of the mind, like numbers, letters, abstract ideas, logic itself, words. Yes, we can write words down, but the letter A isn't a thing in the same way that the blue Minecraft sheep is a thing. This is a physical object, whereas the letter A, even though I can write it down, describe it, and you know what it is, and I know what it is, and we know how to use it, hopefully, is not, I can't hold the letter A. I can hold the thing that is the shape of the letter A, but there is no A. And the idea of A will vanish once the language vanishes. So it's completely dependent upon the brain. So if God is like that, and I think it is, then it's just an abstract concept that humans have come up with. And it exists in the sense that it exists up here as an abstract concept, but it doesn't exist in this world the way that anything else does. And so it needs to do that in order for it to matter. So it doesn't really matter that A doesn't exist at some level. It's there, but it's kind of not there. It's like it's a metaphysical thing. Okay, well, what's that mean? It's real, but it's only real because we made it real with our brain. Okay, so it's useful, but it's not the same sort of real as this is, or whatever the hell. Maybe Pikachu is better. I don't know. Why do I have these things on my computer? Anyways, so in that sense, God, whatever God is, must be real for it to matter. Because if it's just in your brain, if it's just made up, who cares? And so the ongoing, continual debate back and forth is whether or not this is a thing that exists outside of the mind or just in the brain, just in the mind. And brain and mind I'm using in the same way. So, well, what does God look like? Well, you can't ask me that question because my God doesn't look like anything. Well, I didn't know that. I don't know what God you're talking about. There's a lot of God concepts out there. That's one problem. we recognize that there's many concepts of God, that people have an idea, several ideas of what God is or isn't. So how do you arrive at that conclusion without your scripture of choice? And if all you can do is just continuously point at your scripture, then you don't really have an argument. You have a belief in that writing. But I mean, I've pointed people to the lobsterist several times, and so far, no one's converted to lobsterism. I keep trying, though. I keep trying. So, the nature being revealed in the universe is something that you get from the scripture. The he part is also in the scripture. The heavens and earth are all things that you got from the scripture. The idea that this scripture is a record left by this God is also in the scripture, or at least you can extrapolate that from it. Okay, so what standards are we using to find God? The same standards that we use for everything else, I would think, I would hope. Now, maybe that's different for this person than it is for me. You all should know what my things are. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. Empirical evidence, repeatable tests, a valid and sound argument. Well, you can't. I had an objection to that just recently. It was like, well, but you can't prove everything. I was like, well, what things can't you prove? It's like, well, math. You can't prove math. I'm like, yes, you can prove math because it works. It's like, but you have to accept you have to start somewhere. It's like, yeah, you have to accept the axioms, but then you see if the axioms work, and then if they do, then you can use it, and that's the proof that it works. Now, some people have tried to make God into an axiom, which is fine, because that would render God into an object of the mind and not real outside the brain, and I'd be just fine with that. So if there's this thing, then the question is, what evidence is there? And to say, well, look at the universe. It's the universe. Okay, now what? Well, but it's so intelligible. What do you mean by that? Even if it is, so what? Like, what does that mean? If it was unintelligible, would that mean no God? So this is, again, where I ask that question, what would it be what would it look like without God? What would the universe look like without God? So that thought experiment, unsurprisingly, has not been responded to by any theist yet, but then again, I have mostly skeptics on my channel anyways. Spooky Bed Hair, all hail the great lobster. That's right, darn it. All hail Laud. And the lobsterist, to make an analogy, because that's really what that book is about, even though the book is totally true because it says that it's true. Pretty sure it says it's true in the book. If it doesn't, somebody will add that in later, I'm sure. Even though it says don't do that, probably. I don't remember. I haven't read my own thing. Not the thing that I wrote. I didn't write it. Laud wrote it. Yeah. But it goes to great lengths to be real, to seem like a religious book, and it's almost as if it was designed that way. And why do we believe stories? Because that's what we have in religion, is story. We have myth. That's a story. I remember going to Lake Tahoe one time, and at night going down and hearing this beautiful story that the natives there tell about how the lake was formed by this giant leaf falling down and making the lake. Beautiful story. I don't do it justice. You have to go down this very long trail towards what's called the Viking home. You can walk around the Viking home. and you have to set up this tour in advance because it's at night. But at any rate, it was a beautiful story, but it's just a story. I could picture it vividly in my mind. It's beautiful, but I don't believe that a giant leaf made the lake, because there's even if I didn't have the explanation for how the lake formed, I don't have any evidence that a leaf can be that big. So I can't move forward from that. And I'm working on this conversation I have with a he's not young Earth. He doesn't really care what the age of the Earth or universe is. But he does have some issues with biological evolution. But anyways, he's a Christian theist. And unfortunately, my audio is going to be echoey. Well, it is what it is. You know, there's nothing I can do about it. I didn't know that I had to record my side of the audio and his side of the audio in order to have a decent recording. Whoops. But anyways, during that conversation, you know, these sort of things came up, and the continual not understanding, misunderstanding of how things work versus how you believe things work versus whatever. That he did the same problem that Jeremy Spry had. DNA has information. Information only comes from a mind. Well, it's not the same sort of information. Okay, I understand that. But I'm going to keep, but then he just makes the same argument again. You're like, no, you really don't understand. Because I just explained to you, the word is not the same. It's like, but it is the same. No, it's not. So instead of doing that, I just said, you know, he had this particular system that he was using, from some scientist. And the idea was whatever we can know about today, we can extrapolate from that and use that to know about things in the past. And somehow that basic idea was used to dismantle the worldwide flood, which, if you believe in that, forget about it. You don't know anything about science anyways, but whatever. So I said, okay, so what do you mean, you know, this complicated information, because, you know, we want to define information in a particular way, and so it's like, well, it has an intent or whatever. And I just tentatively granted his definition. I said, okay, so what do we know about today that makes that information? So, minds. I said, great. What minds? Well, human minds are the only ones that do this particular type of information. I'm like, okay, I agree. So, using this system, then it would follow the information in DNA has to come from a human mind. It's the only way that that argument can be sound using that particular system. And he was like, well, no, let's just change it to minds. I'll get rid of the human part. I'm like, but you can't, because you can't observe non-human minds. You can only observe human minds. It's like, well, but. I'm like, the argument just doesn't function. And there might be a different argument for God out there, but it won't be this one. I think I got him to accept that. I'm not sure. Hopefully I did. But anyways, that will be up later. But it's the same motif of, well, they're asking us what we would consider as evidence. It's like, well, we've told you many times, empirical evidence, repeatable tests, valid and sound argument, scientific evidence. And you say, well, but God isn't any of those things. You go, okay, well, then why should I believe in it? Well, because I believe it. I want you to be in my group. I want you to be part of my team. I'm reminded of when I was on the cusp of deconverting, this person at a church was like, all right, so what? Even if you make me an atheist, then what? And I was like, well, then we go and change the world together. That like we move forward. Like, what was the point of being an atheist? And on one of the clips of the Atheist Experience, this person called in asking whether or not they should convert their grandmother to atheism. Well, that's not right. You deconvert them. Hello, deconverted man. Hello. Anyways, but, and it was like, well, let her believe this lie until she dies. Like, even if you could convince her, let's say, what would be, what's the use of learning there's no God and perhaps experiencing all sorts of emotional distress in the last moments of life, however long that might be. Maybe it's, a couple of years, maybe it's several years, who knows? But, grandmother's pretty old, so, we don't know. And it's all about, well, does the truth matter? Is the truth more valuable than the person's emotions? In my ethical system, yes. I think the truth is more important than anyone's emotions. But in other ethical systems, the answer might be no. It depends on what ethical system you have and how you frame your morals dependent upon that. So if the theist says, look, the universe is really complicated, you go, yes, I agree. And look, the scriptures say this, and you go, yeah, honestly, I don't care about that. But yes, they say that, okay. And they kind of align if you look at it this way. Like, yeah, I guess, and it's not compelling, it's not convincing, because you wouldn't accept that for any other religion, would you? Like, do you not understand that? Like, if I said the same argument to you but used a different religion, you wouldn't accept that, would you? Would you really accept that? And trying even to get them to do that sort of thought experiment to answer that question is an uphill battle, This person has an actual .com website, storyofthecosmos.com. Let's see what sort of nonsense is on there. How the heavens declare the glory of God. So it's already assuming there's a God. You're already assuming that heavens declare it. So Lee Strobel likes it. That's a point against you. Unraveling the mystery of the universe. I'm going to turn to science for that, not to some book that's not scientific at any rate, because these stories don't really tell us anything about the universe. Otherwise, you could use the Bible to make predictions about scientific discoveries as yet undiscovered. And theists love to go, well, but the Bible always said that the universe had a beginning, see, and then science found that. Haha, we're right. Well, maybe you got one thing right by complete utter accident. That doesn't mean anything. Nobody used that to forward science in any meaningful way. The idea that there wouldn't be evidence of God might actually be an argument for a type of God. So this God requires you to believe in it with pure faith. Just believe in it just because. And if there's no evidence for God, then that's the God that must be real. Well, there's no evidence of God, so that's the God that must be real. But of course, any God claim could just say, well, our God requires no evidence and has no evidence of it, you see? And, well, then how do you pick what God is real? Why is God so abstract? Unless it's an object of the mind. And so what if it is? What does that change? What does that matter? Well, it goes back to the what is true, or what can we know, or what, how do we know anything in the first place? Is it worth it telling my grandma, by the way, there's no afterlife? I mean, well, maybe there is, but I mean, look, there's no God for sure. That I can kill that. Here, look, And then, oh no, it's like, well, sorry about that. Well, have a good death. Bye. Is it worth doing that? It's like, well, don't wait till the last minute, maybe, but it depends on if knowing something false matters or not. And that depends on you. I can't answer that question for you. You have to decide that answer for yourself, because your ethics might be different than my ethics. They probably are. Looking around you, which is the kind of common theistic sort of thing to say, is you can call that backyard theism. Just like you can call, well, I looked around, I didn't see God, backyard atheism. Like, well, I don't see it. Right, God's invisible. What? How do you know that? Well, because I can't see God, so he must be invisible. But, so you're assuming, well, so an attribute of God is that it must be invisible to be God, I guess. We keep asking for evidence from the theist, but the theist, at least the Christian one, couldn't provide that. If they did, their God would have evidence and then not be the God of the Bible, at least not, because Jesus wants you to have faith. He's like, look, Thomas, who I played, you have all this evidence, but blessed are those that don't have it, and still believe. The ones without evidence are better off than the ones with evidence. So are Christians trying to give us Thomas's version and water down our blessing or something? Like, why not just say, and it's faith, there's no evidence, sorry, it's just faith, that's it. And if you have it, then you're blessed. And if you don't, you don't. Okay. I can't prove it to you. It's just a belief. But that's not the apologetic tactic. The apologetic tactic is to say there is evidence, even when there can't be. Even when it doesn't make sense to say that there's evidence. Because that's just what they do. So, I guess those are my thoughts on this particular Twitter post that I read through, and some other random things I came up with. 3 people enjoyed that currently. Hopefully more will later. If you have comments, questions, or other things, put them in the comments so I know. If you have something you want me to talk about, or read, or look at, or analyze, let me know. Just give me feedback so I can use that to do something with. Alright. Until next time, be skeptical. Well, even after next time, just be skeptical. Okay, that's all I got. Okay. Just do the thing. I'm gonna hit the button now. Alright, hit the button.